A look at the issues facing the LGBT community in sports, next on a special edition of Carpe Diem. Hello, welcome to Carpe Diem. I'm Mark Rosenwig, Associate Professor in the School of Communication and Media at Montclair State University. More attention is being paid to the issues faced by the LGBT community in sports. During a panel discussion at the Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center on the MSU campus, I was joined by guests who have studied those challenges both on and off the field. The panel included Hudson Taylor, founder of Athlete Ally, a group that fosters equality in sports and society, Jane McManus, reporter for ESPN.com, and Jared Max, former anchor for both ESPN Radio New York and WCBS Radio. Max told his listeners a couple of years ago that he is gay. For Taylor, who is heterosexual, the drive for equality and respect is a daily priority.
The conversation is evolving every single day. One of the big issues, I think, with professional athletes is, because of social networks, there's no filter. It's very easy for the opinions of a professional athlete to get out to the world. As soon as you hit send, there's no undoing it, even though we hear time and time again, my account was hacked, I didn't mean to send it, I didn't send that. But I think, what's interesting about this is you look 5 years ago and athletes were probably saying these things, they were probably seen saying these things, but they weren't getting fined for it. So I think there's a culture where it's now understood and recognized that this language is problematic, that it hurts our athletic community, it hurts LGBT athletes, it hurts the fans who are, want to watch and enjoy an inclusive and welcoming, I think, sports community. But I think it's just nice to see that these fines are actually being put in place because, if we're not doing something about it, if we're not calling this language into question, then really it just continues to be part of the status quo. It continues to be part of oh, that's just sports culture. That's just how athletes talk. So I think it's a step in the right direction, but this is the beginning of the end. Or this is not the beginning of the end. This is really the end of the beginning. So we're starting to have athletes come out. We're having these conversations, but this fine, I think, shows us that there's a lot of work that has yet to be done.
And not only that, these leagues are also businesses, and they have human rights departments, and they have to follow legal precedent on how to avoid hostile work environments, and every other thing that we've all sat through whenever we sit through HR presentations. And it doesn't seem like much, but they really have a duty to their players and their employees not to feel like they're working in a hostile work environment. And to that end, there's a lot of preventative training now that goes on, sensitizing players. I know the NFL is doing it in the NBA in particular. I'm not sure about the specifics of policies in other leagues, but this is something new as well. Getting in front of this issue, letting athletes know that they probably already work with a gay athlete, whether they know it or not, and that they need to treat people with respect because they don't want to get sued. They don't want to be legally liable for creating this environment where that kind of thing is possible.
You talk about sensitivity training, and I always think of it like it's a dog and pony show. I think of it that it's a joke by and large usually, because to somebody, you go for 3-4 sessions, whatever it is. Do you come out a changed person? Like they say, the leopard goes through the car wash, it still has its spots on the other end. The Philadelphia Eagles receiver who recently went for sensitivity training was ordered to go, and that was because of racial comments which were made. I always wonder, do they come out on the other end, they're a changed person, or is it a matter of educating? I think the fact that what we're doing now, what Hudson does, with us having this panel today about this, these are all like Hudson's saying, it's almost the end of the beginning, that where we have little by little, there are pockets of players coming out, breaking out into the majors now, where we have Robbie Rogers in soccer, a player who was a former U.S. national player who came out, I think about 5 months ago, retired immediately after coming out. And that disappointed me when he came out, because when he retired immediately after, because I thought, you don't have to do that. You don't have to. This is the time to step up. And since Robbie Rogers has kind of found his way back into soccer, went for a tryout with the LA Galaxy, or was just playing with them, and then got signed. And so that's a start. And Jason Collins, of course, coming out as a start. He's not signed anywhere yet, but I don't think that's because Jason Collins is gay. I think it's because Jason Collins was by and large, a marginal player in the NBA for most of his career and is 12 years in. So,
Are you surprised, though, that after Jason Collins' announcement that there weren't more players who came out? Hudson, what do you think?
No, I think that certainly it was an amazing moment, and I think we saw so much support for Jason, and it was, I think, indicative of where the sports culture is at, that there's probably a lot more allies than we give athletics credit for. But when you think about these decisions from the position of a closeted player, there's a lot more to consider. I mean, the average career of an NBA player is 4.7 years. So they're looking to Jason and saying, well, wait, he came out, the response was wonderful, but is he now still playing? Is he picked up? And he hasn't been. And, again, I think that it's probably because he's 12 years in and it's because of performance. But, if there's a small sense, a small fear that your sexual orientation is going to in some way hurt your viability as a professional athlete, why not just wait, right? And I think Robbie is tremendously breaking barriers. I think seeing him compete and do well hopefully will lead to more athletes coming out. But I also think it's kind of a chicken or the egg problem. Like, you don't have more allies speaking out and being supportive until they think they know somebody who's LGBT. And the LGBT folks don't feel comfortable coming out because they don't think there's anybody in their circle that supports them. So I think before we can have that tipping point, we need coaches and owners and corporate sponsors to all be explicitly supportive.
Take the bull by the horns and stand up and say what you know is right when it comes down to it. I think we're at a point where people like it. You mentioned Kobe Bryant before. Kobe was fined $50,000, if I remember, for using the most common homophobic slur that there was. And I think he went through his training, and there's something which, to me, something has changed in Kobe. Because when he went at it with somebody on Twitter last year, where he took he went on the offensive and says, whoa, this is not cool language. And they said, yeah, but you said that, you're a hypocrite. He says, yeah, I said it and I was wrong and I learned from it. This is not cool to be using this language, it's hurtful, et cetera, et cetera. We need, I want to see that the biggest names in every sport step forward and say, enough of this garbage already. This is enough. We all have somebody who's a brother, a cousin, an uncle, a best friend, an aunt. Let's stop pretending that we're living in a different time. And we need the biggest people to step forward, because when they do, if you just look at a pack-like mentality, think of summer camp as a kid. If the counselor steps forward and says, guys, listen, we don't talk like that around here, the kids aren't going to do it. And I think that kind of mentality we're getting closer to it, but allies are huge. That's what I've come to realize, how important the ally is. And also when you look at the fear of like a Chris Kluwe, who was a punter for the Minnesota Vikings last year. I'm a Vikings fan, so Kluwe, and there are a couple other players who've spoken very strongly against homophobia. And Chris Kluwe is a guy who should be in the NFL right now and doesn't have a job. And I'm sure Jane could speak to, and let's talk about Kerry Rhodes. Kerry Rhodes is a player who played for the Jets, who's a top-level
safety. Some of our audience
safety.
may be familiar with Kerry, having played for the Jets. And what's your view of that situation, Jane? Is he being discriminated against? And he has not said that he is gay.
No, see, and I think that's
and I don't. Let's not.
Right.
Yeah, there's just been speculation.
No, but
and
stuff. And
right.
in some ways, though, the speculation isn't so different from the person who comes out and says that they're gay because they get the same backlash. Let's face it, they get a backlash.
Yeah.
So, and I think not everybody is, no matter what their sexuality is. Let's say you're on the fence. Let's say you're not sure. Let's say you like both. are you the kind of person who really wants to stand up and explain that to the world on a podium? I mean, that takes a special person. You've got to lead the gay pride parades. You've got to get up and, take the abuse. You've got to, I mean, there's a lot that goes on with coming out and saying that you're gay in a public forum that's more than just being authentic. So I think that that's a consideration for anybody who wants to come up. As for Kerry Rhodes in particular, I think that he's dealing with rumors and smear and speculation for a fact. We know that, that he's dealing with someone who's come and said and made these accusations in a public forum, in tabloids and on websites and that kind of thing. And so for him, I think being an ally or anti-discrimination policies are not just about protecting those who come out and say that they're gay, but they're also about protecting those from being discriminated against because of assumptions, slander, smear, lies, or discrediting in any other way, trying to paint that person as something that they're not or that they don't want to be seen as, or
Not that there's anything wrong with it.
Not that there's anything
that
wrong.
whole.
But in addition to the part about him being gay, the people who are coming out and saying things about Kerry are also making some other unflattering assumptions. So it's not just one thing, but
And it's not just in sports. We have, for example, Hugh Jackman in entertainment, where
Right.
stories have been written and so on. And then, the other question related to this, though, is what are reporters doing about this? How are they reporting these stories, or are many of them just shying away from these issues because it's a lot easier just to report, who gained 100 yards and, who caught the winning touchdown?
Well, I think for me, I'm not going to. I want to make sure that, reporting on somebody saying something about somebody else is a little too many degrees of separation. I'd rather have a person either, say yes or say no, or have that person weigh in before I go in and write a story about that, I think.
And I'm sure that if you go, I'm just guessing at how, I don't know how this works across all platforms of media, but you probably don't just unilaterally say, hey, I'm going to write in the story today, and then your editor comes back and says, well, is this necessarily the way that our company wants to be going? Because you talk about money and politics, and while there could be individuals within the media who could speak a certain way, who could ask certain questions, it's not necessarily, the same thing, is a player going to risk it? I mean, if Jane goes out and writes a story about something which maybe was paints a very strong image of, hey, someone here looks like they're maybe getting a little bit the raw side of a deal here. Is Jane risking her own career in the same kind of sense with the employer?
Not, yeah.
And you hope not,
Yeah.
but what happens is, again, because there's money involved and there's not, I feel like we're at we really are the grassroots of it. I hope one day someone will, look back, if there's still a history book and it's not just, a chip in our brains, but that somebody could point to this being a grassroots point where it was, building, and wow, one day they actually had to do that, because there's, I don't know if there's gay people who are in the audience, but we know that there's just because things are supposed to be all equal. We read in history all about separate but equal, and I think we're still in a point where we would love for everything to be equal. It's not quite there yet, but we are at a point, and that's why it's so important to have events like today, and people like Hudson leading this type of charge. I mean, he's not the only one, and we need so many more that are like him, but to basically step forward and say, this is cool, this is fine, I'm me, you're you, we're all, you like chocolate ice cream, I like vanilla, where's the problem?
I think, and so much is unsaid, like with Jason or with Kerry, and you don't know if there's a general manager sitting there and going, you know what, he's a great safety, but I heard those rumors, or with Jason as well.
Well, so that, I think, brings up a much bigger issue is, a lot of these leagues are starting to do education sensitivity trainings for their players. I just had the opportunity to work with all of the incoming NBA rookies on LGBT issues.
Right.
So hour-long discussions with these 18, 19-year-old kids talking about these things for the first time. And, what was really surprising is they're a lot further along on this than we probably give them credit for. But I think when it comes to the decision for Jason Collins to get picked up, it's the coaches and the owners that also need to have this conversation that probably aren't. Because, everybody keeps coming back to distraction. right? Distraction. Whatever that distraction looks like, I guess it's a bad thing in professional sports. So like Chris Cluey, distraction. Like, rumors about somebody's sexual orientation, distraction.
And that's all viable. You're talking to incoming players in the NBA, 18, 19 years old. And I've gotten to see, at least especially since I came out came out publicly, that it's the younger generation, which to me seems, they're pretty cool, they're in line. If you're under the age of 25, it seems, if you have a problem with homophobia, or if you're homophobic, you are really like, whoa, man, you're from another time.
Yeah.
Is it possible that it's an older generation? You think you'd have, what do you think the reception would be from players who are, let's say, 5 years and up in the NBA, guys who are 24, 25 years old and older, and maybe even...
Or the coaches, the 50-year-old
or
coach.
Or the coaches.
Like the guy at Rutgers, right?
Yeah.
Who used homophobic slurs on the basketball court.
So I think, what I've seen from players is, one, we have to be careful about, like, obviously the younger generations are, by and large, more inclusive and get this a lot quicker than others. However, I do think there are lots of geographic similarities or, issues. I go to about 60 colleges a year brought in by the athletic departments to talk about these issues, but it's still like, Northeast, West Coast, and there's a lot of places where nobody has any issue in discussing this. Now with the incoming players, I think the general sense is playing on the court with an openly gay player, I have no problem with. I understand that, diversity is beneficial to athletic success, and if he can play and play well, I want him on my team. Where we still have some issues is, what about the locker room? What about the showers? I got a lot of feedback from players saying, well, if I was in a women's locker room, like, people wouldn't feel comfortable with that. That wouldn't be okay. Like, how is this any different? So, and I think that those are real questions that we need to talk through and we need to work out. But that's where I think the rubber meets the road a little bit. I mean, it's easy to say, like, yes, we all can play and play together, but
that's the point.
Are you comfortable with your teammate kissing their partner after you win, or bringing them to the after team party where real life happens? So I think that's.
And how about, and if you're not tough, man, leave, because you're not. That doesn't fly here anymore.
Right, and that's being heard very loud and clear, I think, by the players. Now with the older generation, I mean, one of the interesting kind of similarities that I've seen. Well, this is kind of the older generation, not the guys who are still playing, but I've been working with some retired NBA players, and they always go back to Magic and how people were so uncomfortable playing with Magic, and see a real similarity between these two things. It's like there's an issue, there's a conversation, and we grow.
Different time also.
Yeah. So again, I think we're getting there, but.
Hudson's touching on something. I'm curious, and I'm asking Jane about this because I've always wondered. I mean, I think the Lisa Olson, right? She was was she the first female reporter who was in the NFL locker room? Like,
No.
She was.
no.
She had
She
a
won the
whole
lawsuit,
incident with,
right?
She
with
was
Foxborough.
that's right. But that occurred in the early 90s, and women had been in NFL locker rooms
For
for
some
probably
time.
15, 20 years by then.
I can only imagine, because I know that when I tell you, when I first went into an NFL locker room, I was going to Hofstra at the time, and so the Jets were training at Hofstra. So I was 19, 20, and getting to cover it was kind of cool, getting to be part of that. But I was aware at that age, while I was not even out to myself yet, I knew I was attracted to men, and I also was aware that my career that I was starting at a nice spot was something I was wanting to do my whole life. And I knew that last thing in the world I'm ever going to do is be looking in the locker room, aware there's going to be, not only are there going to be sites, but there's also, people who actually would be world-class athletes. So you'd have everything in the world to look at if I wanted to look at something. And I could tell you that in all the years doing what I've been doing, which is like 20 years in locker rooms, never have gone to sneak a peek or gone to do that. And for the reason being, the work is too much.
That's what
work is too important. So I wanted to
right.
ask Jane. Like,
John Amici, I talked to him about this, and he was a player in the NBA who came out after he retired. Has probably been out, I would say, for what, 7-8 years now, if not a little bit longer. But he said the same thing. He said if you were gay and you were in an NFL or NBA or major pro sport locker room, you are terrified that someone's going to find out about it, and the last thing you're going to want to do is use that as your personal bar scene. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's really. I mean, I think that's a workplace, a locker room. I mean, it's not, and sure there's some boyish hijinks that go on, and that's all fine and good, but it is really a place of employment in a lot of ways, which is why you have these policies, these anti-harassment policies that have been implemented by different leagues, because they want players to see that as a locker, because of what happened to Lisa Olson. That was harassment, plain and simple, based on her gender. And and as Sainz visited the Jets locker room 3 years ago, I think it was 3 years ago to a day 2 weeks ago, that's why Woody Johnson volunteered to fund a league-wide anti-harassment policy that I think has ended up being the foundation of what is now anti-harassment policy when it comes to sexual orientation. So, and the NFL has used that as an opportunity to kind of get in front of some of those issues.
I would also just say when I kind of have the locker room conversation with athletes, the way that I frame it is like, look, whether an athlete is out or closeted, the only thing that changes is your perception of the situation. Their conduct doesn't change, their relationship with you doesn't change, they're not going to, be any different. All that changes is maybe their ability to play a little bit better because they can now feel comfortable being themselves. They now have one less burden to bear. So for me, being uncomfortable with somebody being out is never enough of a justification to ask a player to stay in the closet for their entire career. Because again, all that changes is how you see the situation.
Now, Jared, you talked about your personal situation a little bit. How did you come to the decision to go onto the air and say to your listeners, I'm gay and so on, and how difficult was that? What prompted you to finally make that decision?
Part of the short answer of that is read it in the book. Which is, the bottom line is, and I've been saying this since because I've been asked that question a lot, and I think when a chick is ready to hash out of its egg, it's ready. And that speaks a lot to it. I mean, I went through some pretty dark times when I was in college because I didn't think, when I came to realize this is who I was, I didn't think I could live my life that I had set out to live. And even when you were just introducing me before and said Jared Max and that he told his audience he's gay, that I just have a flashback thinking, geez, it's such, as Jane was saying, it's the most personal, guarded secret anybody could really have, unless it was some secret that you're really there are some secrets that people have that rival this, but this is a pretty big one, pretty big meatball to keep in as a secret, and it's something so personal. It shouldn't be. It seems in Europe it's not such a big deal. It's not such an or in other places. Well, Europe's probably the forefront leader of it, but times I've been over to Europe and I remember thinking before I came home, like, I tighten up thinking and realizing that there is a sense of being repressed in the U.S. And I think for me at some point it was just like enough is enough. And there was that week when I came out, there had been all these other people coming out too. And maybe I was jumping on and seizing an opportunity as far as, I don't know when I felt I might have a small crack of a window opening again. For me, I felt like it was the time. And my brother had told me that, he says, Jared, I thought, I had a feeling it was coming because you had been speaking about some things leading up to it in the weeks before, and I didn't quite realize it. But that's why I say when someone's ready to hatch, it's time to come out. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I guess I couldn't shut up.
And what was the reaction of for example, your listeners?
I was just talking. Excellent. I mean, I was not afraid that people were going to go away. I'd been working in New York radio a long time. I guess I came out in May, and then 8 months later, our show, the Maxed Out show, became ranked #1 in Arbitron for the 5 o'clock hour in New York City. And that's going up against, some major New York radio. So for me, that was like, wow, okay, people aren't running away. You know, they hadn't, you know, and then I could look at it and say, wait a second, this is, the station where I was at, where ESPN New York, well, shows had never really come even close to cracking that, and all of a sudden, bam, so you can't tell me that people had a problem with it. And I just sat, when we first were putting our mics on, and Jane and I were talking about, you know, reception of, when I first went back to the stadiums, be it baseball or football, and the reception from my colleagues, reporters I'd worked around was just, you know, we're grown up, we're mature. And I think that's what, like Hudson's talking about, you know, with Magic Johnson and stuff. Back then there was the fear of, you think of Greg Louganis hitting his head in the pool, and whoa, how come he didn't tell anybody, in the HIV or Magic? And we've come to learn a little bit more, I think, as time goes on. And it's, you know, as kids, you know, oh, don't touch him, he has the cooties. At some point, I think that gets, it becomes a mature conversation. So I came out because it was, thank goodness I did. It was time. And if there's, you know, I have my life, I have my freedom. I don't walk around with a mask on. I know, you know, everything is real. You know, I don't know what comes after this life, but I know this is the one I definitely have. And I'd be an absolute fool to not be myself, because someone has their, you know, because the majority still might have ideals that are rooted in just bigotry, or it's not even necessarily bigotry as it is ignorance. That it's about education. If Hudson's going out, we're educating people to see, listen, you and I were the same, and don't tell me that stupid stuff about, oh, well, whatever you do in your bedroom, that's ridiculous. If you still have a problem with it, if I'm gay and you're straight, and I even went up and started, hey man, how you doing? What have I really done? Have I committed any crime? Because if it's okay for the yo bro hijinks that Jane's talking about in the locker room, if that's okay, well, why would this not be? And I think it's time for the other side to get over it.
In our next program, part 2 of our discussion, we'll hear about the controversy surrounding the upcoming, let's start again, please. Can we do it again?
We're just rolling. So I'm just going to kill you, Mom.
Go ahead. In our next program, part 2 of our discussion, we'll hear about the controversy surrounding the upcoming Winter Olympics in Russia, a country that has an anti-gay ordinance. Special thanks to Yogi Berra Museum Director Dave Kaplan for making our panel possible. For more information on this or any edition of Carpe Diem, contact us at carpediem@mail.montclair.edu or call 973-655-5158. I'm Mark Rosenwig. For all of us at Montclair State University, thanks for watching Carpe Diem.